Pod. Welcome back, Pod, to another episode of Say Who Say Pod. He's Danny O'Neill in a polo shirt, getting a little humid there in New York City.
Starting to get sticky. It's gotten a little milder, but we've had the first hints of summer.
I'm Christian Caple. First hints of summer in Tacoma too. Frankly,
there you go.
I have certain temperature thresholds for what I wear to walk the dog. And once it gets over like 55, I don't necessarily want sleeves. A little chilly to start, but you warm up. Now we're getting into no sleeves and shorts territory here. I think the high is supposed to be in the mid 70s today. Supposed to get, I think, even warmer later this week. So part of me feels like, man, it's early. It always feels early for it to get warm, but then I look up and it's going to be June in a few days. So I guess it makes sense.
One of the things I've learned about New York is people aren't as quick to wear shorts out here. And it's not even a we dress up to go to work here thing. Like even casual walking in the park, people are not as quick to wear shorts. Maybe that's the Northwest stereotype or tendency of like, hey, once it's above 50, you can wear shorts if you're a dude. But it surprised me. I'm definitely on the edge of, hey, I'm the only person here wearing shorts.
Interesting. I feel like it's the opposite out here. I remember in college, the threshold for like people sitting, like sun tanning in the quad was like, there was no temperature threshold. It was just if the sun is out, there are going to be people out there behaving as if it's 90 degrees.
Well, I'm not sure if you worked with him at the News Tribune, but there was a journalist, an editor in the Pacific Northwest who was famous for never wearing shorts. Victor Yoshida would go, I know he went years without putting on long pants.
Oh, yeah. Victor to this day only wears shorts.
Yeah.
Works at the Seattle Times now.
Big Vic. Love Vic. Worked with him at ESPN.com.
Victor was, unfortunately, a dying breed, part of a dying breed in newspapers and journalism in general. What I mean by that is like a copy editor with immense institutional knowledge who would save you from yourself over and over and over again, who would catch things like, hey, you said this guy was from this, he's actually from this town. You must have been thinking of, or hey, you mentioned it was the first time this statistical thing had happened since, actually, I remember like 4 years ago, someone like he just had like every newspaper used to have multiple people like that on the desk who, I suppose the Times is one of the few that maybe still does, but
some of them, they've lost. Every newspaper's lost a lot of that. I always thought of them as the section nooge, like the person who just was a storehouse of an amount of information that no one could accumulate professionally. You had to be slightly obsessive. No, more than slightly obsessive. Very obsessive and completely dedicated to that little corner of the earth.
They're very obsessive and completely dedicated to selling Kias at Chuck Olson Kia in Shoreline.
Yeah, they are.
Locally owned and operated since 1964. Family owned and operated by a family of University of Washington graduates with a friendly, low-pressure sales staff and a competitively priced selection of vehicles. We hope and we know you'll make Chuck Olson Kia in Shoreline your next vehicle buying destination. When you do, we know you'll ask for our friend Henry Olson. And when you talk to Henry, we sure hope you'll tell him that Say Who Say Pod sent you. This episode of Say Who Say Pod also brought to you by our friends at Husky Mobile. Husky Mobile is partnered directly with the University of Washington to offer affordable phone plans for the Husky community, with up to 7% of each bill going back to UW Athletics. Subscribers can also enjoy game day perks like fast pass lanes, seat upgrades, and giveaways, all while on T-Mobile's nationwide 5G network. Use code ONMontlake at checkout to get your first month free when transferring your number. You can do that at gohuskymobile.com. Thanks again to Husky Mobile for supporting today's show. Maria Cantwell and Ted Cruz are going to save college sports, Danny.
I had heard about the initial reports of this being in the works, and now there's, I don't even know how you say where it is in the process, but it's going to be a proposal. They're going to try to get this through. I hope it works. I think it would be a significant improvement on the current situation, and I don't think it has the drawbacks of the previous attempt, which was the SCORE Act. And I was not in support of the SCORE Act. I thought that was a mistake. This one is a much this one in my view is a much more feasible framework. I have no idea how to handicap its chances of success, but I think it makes a lot of sense, the points that they put forward.
Yeah, I think the fact that it's bipartisan, I think, makes it more intriguing to begin with. I still see a lot of issues with it, and I think handicapping the likelihood of any college sports bill like this, any sweeping college sports bill like this being passed in Congress is, there's easy money to be made by betting against it.
Yeah. Let's talk about the bipartisan thing for a second, because I think this is becoming a bipartisan issue. It's everything in our country, I feel like, fractures along these political planes. And this is one of the only ones I can think of that it isn't necessarily. You have a lot of longtime conservatives, especially in places like North Carolina, who are longtime conservatives who are adamantly for the payment to college athletes. It's a really interesting issue. I can't think of that many parallels to it.
Well, I think folks are in favor of players being paid to a point, and I think what the biggest issue I see with this bill, and Ross Dellinger at Yahoo, as always, has a very thorough breakdown of what's in it. Again, like Danny mentioned, if you've been following either closely or passively the legislative news in the college sports realm, you may have heard the SCORE Act bandied about. That's dead. This is a different bill. This is in the Senate. I don't believe it's actually been introduced yet.
It has not been introduced. They're preparing. This is the full-fledged trial balloon at this point that has been sent out of, like, we're fully intending to introduce that to see if anybody can sink it before it goes into before it is introduced to the Senate.
This is the Protect College Sports Act. It is co-authored by Washington's own Senator Maria Cantwell and Ted Cruz in Texas, a Democrat and a Republican, perhaps crucially. What's a little bit different from the SCORE Act is this bill does not attempt to preclude the possibility that athletes could someday be deemed employees.
It doesn't explicitly forbid collective union organizing. It doesn't. The SCORE Act spelled out was specifically, they're not going to be employees and they're not going to be able to bargain collectively. And this bill doesn't include any of that, as far as I can tell.
It explicitly offers no opinion.
Exactly.
I believe it. I haven't read the bill itself, but it appears to me as if it explicitly states passage of this bill cannot be used as an argument against that athletes are not employees, as an argument against collective bargaining. So in this bill, you have the co-authors saying, hey, we're not saying athletes can't be employees. They might be. While also fixing a salary cap, fixing a compensation cap. And in an interview with Ross Dellinger, Maria Cantwell did say that that's a floating cap. Whether it's the conferences or the schools, they could always agree to raise it, and so on and so forth. And look, I get it. I think the biggest frustration with coaches is that, like, they don't have a target with raising the money and coming up with the money obviously is frustrating in its own right. But not having a target, not having a goal, not even knowing, like, year to year, what is it going to take to compete, not knowing exactly what other schools are spending, not having just like a number to build into your budget and to work toward and to work against, I think is a frustration. So codifying something that tells schools, here is what you can spend, and if you try to spend more, the full force of the law will be behind anybody who comes to enforce this against you. The CSC, the NCAA will actually have legal standing, legal authority to exact punishment on you for this or that violation, and you're not going to be able to go get an injunction against them because it's going to be written into the law. On paper, I think coaches would be in favor of that. Schools would be in favor of that. But you're telling a class of people, again, who were not involved in coming up with that number, who were not allowed to unionize and did not have a seat at the bargaining table. Here is the maximum amount of money collectively that you can earn via each school, and there will be punishment, legal punishment for anybody trying to pay you more than this. Oh, but you might be employees, maybe down the road, but we're gonna fix a cap right now anyway.
I'm operating under the assumption that any attempts to impose a salary cap are going to be quickly circumvented. I believe corruption is endemic in college football. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. That doesn't mean you shouldn't institute a limit. Almost everything, and this comes from the tweet you sent me of Ross Dellinger's summary of the rules that are in they're expected to be in the proposal. And let's go one by one and just say, like, do we think it's reasonable or not? One-time transfer. So one time you can transfer without it affecting your eligibility. Does that seem fair? Like, would you, on its face, that seems reasonable to me? That if you transfer a second time, it's not that you can't do it, but you're going to, you could have your eligibility affected. What's your read on that?
I think most would be in favor of that.
5-year eligibility, pro player ban, which this is going to put a real dent in Will Wade's plans to stock his roster with 25-year-old dudes from overseas who are drafted the same year as Anthony Edwards.
This is going to happen anyway. The NCAA is, I think, voting on it in June. It seems quite likely that the 5-5 rule will go into effect beginning with the 2026-27 academic year. As we've talked about and as I've written about, like, that means that true seniors this year, fourth-year seniors this year, guys like Landon Hatchett, X-Ray Alexander, Jacob Lane, Alex McLaughlin, and Jaden Lamar, those are the 5 on Washington's roster who would otherwise be seniors with 5-5. Those guys would each have a 5th year of eligibility should they want it. I've seen a lot of coaches, primarily in other sports, I think, but express concerns about what this is going to do for roster management and how it might harm incoming recruiting classes. And how are you going to, without knowing whether a true senior or a 4th year senior is going to exercise that 5th year or not in advance, how do you build your recruiting class? There are players who schools have taken commitments from in sports who are probably going to be told, hey, we got 3 seniors who want to come back and we'd rather have them than you. So sorry, but your spot's not here. So it's going to create some issues. Generally speaking, I don't think anybody is opposed to the idea of limiting college athletic participation to 5 years. And I feel like it's going to be unfair and certain, like, look, you tear your ACL 3 different years and you miss 3 years. This 5-5, and we'd see how you have to see how it would be written in the bill. But as the NCAA is exploring it and talking about it, this 5-5 would mean like, oh, you're out of luck. You got 5 years. There's no more medical waivers. There's waivers for like maternity leave, military service, and
missions,
religious missions. Yeah.
My feeling on this is, if you're going to go the route of increased professionalization, which is clearly what is happening, then there are going to be some more professional guidelines. And one of them is that there are rules that are in place. If an NFL team drafts a guy and he's unable to play for 2 of his 4 years, it's not like his free agent, they're like, oh, we get those 2 years that he was hurt and didn't play. Like, no, it's big boy. Like, it goes how it goes. And if you're unfortunately injury riddled, you can't keep playing indefinitely at that highest level. I'm okay with that trade-off. And as for coaches' objections, I have decided that I will listen to coaches complain about the challenges of roster management and start agitating on their behalf if they pledge not to run guys off. I'm just going to, because that happens too. And I'm not totally indifferent to the concerns that are expressed of, hey, if I don't know if this guy's coming back or not, it can make things harder on me. Okay. Then if we're going to accommodate that, you have to pledge to never run a guy off. Never run a guy off. Never tell him like, hey, you're not going to play here. Hey, you can be on scholarship, but you can't meet with, like, all of those things that we know coaches do. Not all of them, but definitely some of them.
I think that's fair. So the verdict there, I think generally speaking, 5-5 is one of those things that once it goes into effect, like, I don't think people are going to care.
Yeah. I think that's the right thing.
Be some initial heartburn over the freshman class enrollment and how do you manage that. But I think generally speaking, people would think that's a good thing.
Hard cap. We kind of already talked about that. I don't think people are going to be against a hard cap. I just think it's going to be impossible to enforce. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try.
Yeah, there are certain people who would love a lower cap, who would love players to be paid less than they're being paid now. I'm not opposed to a hard cap either, but collectively bargain it. You don't just get to tell the laborer they might be employees, maybe down the road. We're not saying they're not. We're not offering an opinion on it. But this is the most you can pay them. Come on.
Yeah. Wouldn't work in other parts of the country. 5% max agent fee.
Love that.
Everybody's going to love that.
Love that.
Nobody's going to complain that agents should be making more money. This is my personal favorite. The Lane Kiffin rule.
Yes. So this is interesting because just in terms of like the early reaction I've seen to this is the one I think most people would love, absolutely love. Like, what it is would prevent head coaches from leaving their team before the season is over. This is how it is in the NFL.
Yes.
But I think there are questions about the legality of trying to include this in a bill, and does it infringe on First Amendment rights?
Yeah. It is. I don't want to defend, and I'm not defending Lane Kiffin. Wasn't Ole Miss part of that? I don't think Ole Miss was going to let him take that job and finish out the season. Right?
So here's where, Lane Kiffin is certainly, like, if he were to defend this in a court of law, certainly his attorney would say, my client wanted nothing more than to finish the season with
he wanted
his
to
team.
Stay and coach.
He begged to. He went out of his way to. His employer would not allow him to. His employer told him he had to get out that day. It was torture for my client to watch his team participate in the college football playoff watched on television. So there'd be some semantics. I think we all accept that once a decision was made, you don't take that job intending to continue coaching. You know for a fact that your employer in the same conference is not going to let you do that. But yeah, this is, so when we've broached the subject before about conference governance and the Big Ten and the SEC potentially breaking away from the NCAA and governing themselves and having their own rules, and maybe some of that having a greater chance of holding up legally because of certain precedent. We talked about the Ivy League thing. This is a big one for me. And we touched on it before when I think it was either in January or February, Jed Fish had a press conference. It's kind of a state of the program type press conference, and was saying that when it comes to contract enforcement, coaches need to set the example, and coaching contracts need to matter too. How can coaches break their contracts and leave their schools all the time and then turn around and tell players, but yours matter and ours don't? And it was easy to laugh at that for obvious reasons a little bit. But I think he's going down the right path in that, in the NFL, you cannot hire another team's head coach away.
Right.
I think if the Big Ten were to govern itself, whether this ends up being in this bill or not, like, one of the rules it should establish is no Big Ten team can hire another Big Ten team's head coach without significant penalty or without those two programs coming to agreement on terms.
Right.
Okay, you can hire our head coach and pay us $30 million.
That the team that he's being hired from has to release him. The team that he's being hired from has the choice to hold on to him, force him to honor his contract, or to accept compensation for his departure.
So
do you think because I don't, man, I'm not sure how you'd be able to legislate that. Because it does get into, even if the Big Ten agreed to it, does it make that much of a difference if the SEC is not part of that agreement, or the Big 12 is not part of that agreement, because that the Big Ten can't control what those other schools do. I am 100%, I do believe that college coach contracts should be structured like NFL contracts, that you should, and the result is that they will get much shorter, and they will be certainly have more leverage to keep the coach in place, but they'll mean something. I don't know how you get to that point to make them do that, because coaches and coaching agents, Jimmy Sexton, have so much influence over the structure of the game. They would never agree to that. But I do think that that's the way it should be. That, okay, if you want to go get another job, that's the way it works in international soccer for players. You have contracts, and guys move between teams all the time. They move up, they're sold, all of these different things that happen. But to do that, the team that's letting go of the guy has to accept the compensation it's getting.
As a brief aside, if we ever do arrive at collective bargaining in college sports, are player trades going to be part of the CBA? Because that's one thing, like if you're, there's a world where you are as progressive as it gets about player rights in college sports, but oppose a CBA specifically because, like, you believe that the lawless nature of the current environment is preferable to one where you're unionized and operating under a contract with strict rules. And I could see that being a talking point, right? Like, oh, like you think you want to see, like, how would a CBA be better for players if it mimics the NFL in allowing teams to trade players back and forth? Now, it's not like the NFL is a trade happy enterprise like Major League Baseball, but
so I have honestly never considered that until you just said it, and my initial reaction is hell to the nah. I do not want to see trades. And then the next thought I had was, oh, would that be how will we start drafting recruits? Do the worst teams in a conference get the first choice of recruits that recruits commit to a conference, and then there's a draft of those recruits? Like, both of those, I just say fundamentally, okay, that's I can't stomach that. I just can't imagine still liking college football if that was part of it.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would.
But it's like, as an intellectual exercise, it's an interesting point, because it does, like, okay, at what point are you okay with the professionalization? And I would be like, that's too far. I can't do that.
What's next on our list here?
The next one after the Lane Kiffin rule is optional pooling of TV rights.
Also interesting. So I believe the language is that 75% of FBS would have to agree to this. And it's not that 75%, if you get 75% of FBS in agreement, then that's enough to pool everybody's rights together. So, like, interestingly, the Big Ten and SEC account for just under 25% of the FBS. The other 75% couldn't get together and vote to pool rights and force the SEC and Big Ten to pool their rights. As I read it, I can't imagine that would be the case. And Ted Cruz and Maria Cantwell both talked in Ross Dellinger's story about how they would encourage the rest of FBS to try to negotiate with the Big Ten and SEC to get them on board and come to some sort of compromise. Of course, there would be nothing stopping every other school except for the Big Ten and SEC from pooling their rights. That they would make up a 75% constituency, but what value would that group have, right? You would not have any of the very most valuable brands in college football, with the exception of Notre Dame. So it wouldn't make a ton of sense without those two leagues. And I think what the 75% threshold also aims to accomplish, at least my assumption, is that, the Power Four schools together do not make up 75% of FBS. So just the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, and ACC could not, as a group of 65 or 66 or whatever, pool their rights together and say, like, all right, we're going to maximize our value and only share it among the very biggest, most powerful brands in the sport and screw everybody else. You would have to also bring a significant number of the rest of FBS along with you. So that seems like not the worst thing. There's also a provision in there that prevents leagues that report more than $1 billion in revenue annually from further consolidating, i.e. it prevents the Big Ten and SEC from forming a super league.
That's the last part. I don't want to see a super league unless there's relegation. Like that's like I don't. If there's relegation, I'm so interested in seeing relegation in American sports that I'm willing to okay the Super League if you had the bottom 4 teams move out and the top 4 teams of the next tier down. Like if we do create a ladder, because I think that would be the best thing that could happen to American sports. Like for fans, for spectators, I think it would be awesome. I hope it's introduced to more leagues. Anybody who wonders about how to fix tanking, relegation. It's easy, straightforward. We have plenty of examples of how it works. But as we construct leagues in this country, I hate the idea of a super league. And I would put that in the, if there's a super league formed, I'm not saying I'm going to stop following college football because I probably won't, but I'm really not going to like it.
Yeah. Which of these do you think are most likely to be negotiated out as they begin discussing this bill? Because as we said, like, it literally hasn't even been introduced yet. Its final form is not going to look like what it looks like today. If they want to get this thing through, like, what do you think are the most fraught issues?
I think it's the prohibition on the Super League. Like, I think because I think that the transfer, the eligibility plan, which is already largely in place, I don't think people are terrified of the hard cap. Because I think everybody, I just don't think, I think everybody looks at that like they've always looked at it, which is, okay, you tell us what we'll do and then we'll work around it. But I think the prohibition, because, and this probably betrays my own perspective on powerful institutions, which is, I think that powerful institutions tend to push most forcefully against things that are going to prohibit their power or restrict their power. And that's one, if there is a prohibition on a super league, like I could see that being something where the SEC and the Big Ten and their member schools are like, you're absolutely not going to tell us we can't do that. You're not going to create that hurdle. If we agree to all this other stuff, you're not going to make it so we get accused of breaking the law if we still end up doing that.
Yeah, I just tend to default to this won't get through.
Really? Yeah.
It's as palatable as anything we've seen suggested. And like we said, I mean, there are a number of provisions in here that anybody would say, like, okay, yeah, like college athletes shouldn't be able to play more than 5 years. One-time transfer. That's still better than the way it was even 15 years ago.
Yeah.
It helps stabilize things. It'll help with fan buy-in and familiarity. You'll feel like you actually know the team again, and you can permit yourself to get excited about a certain recruiting class, knowing that they might leave, but the one-time transfer certainly disincentivizes it. So there are a number of things I think would make the sport better, but this compensation issue is not going away. And I just don't see how anybody can accept the idea of capping compensation to a group of people who were not brought to the bargaining table.
Yeah. So there are the political mechanics of how it wouldn't pass. And this, I am sort of not going to profess any expertise in this. Here's what surprised me though, or I'm still trying to, it seems fuzzy to me, is why the politicians can't agree on solutions, or why the SCORE Act was pretty much DOA. I know why I think it shouldn't have been, but it's not like support for unions. Like that would have been the number one thing for me, would have been the lack of the prohibitions on collective bargaining and organizing. But that's not stopping the political process, right? Like there were even, I mean, the Black Caucus was making sounds like they might be okay with that part, which was shocking to me because of the demographics of the players involved, and that would have actually denied representation to them. But there's some sort of political game that's going on, or they saw a potential advantage by indicating they were receptive to that idea. I kind of can't get why you have general bipartisan support for compensation of the players and a reformed system, and yet they still can't get anything, couldn't get it through the House, and now we'll see if it gets through the Senate. It's hard for me to understand exactly where the deal-breaking opposition comes from.
Yeah, I mean, with the SCORE Act, first of all, the idea was that it had no chance of passing the Senate, even if it got there, right?
Right. They knew that they didn't work to pass it in the House because they knew it wasn't getting through the Senate.
Yeah, you mentioned the Congressional Black Caucus basically stepped up and said that they would not support any bill supported by the SEC because leaders of SEC institutions had not spoken out against attacks on the Voting Rights Act, and basically said, like, don't bother because you won't have the votes. So that killed that. It will be interesting to see what the response is towards this particular bill. I guess we'll have to wait and see, like, how the Big Ten and SEC approach it.
Yeah, it's a strange issue in that you had the origin of NIL, when and why NIL came to be allowed in college sports, really traces back to state legislatures and primarily blue states. California, I think, was the first one that did it, where it was they were passing laws that prohibited the NCAA from prohibiting athletes from earning money from endorsements. Like that's the seed. So it starts out as kind of a progressive issue, but you also have now a wide array of, like I said, like really conservative voices or long-standing politicians who are in support of compensation of players, and they're coming at it from a free trade perspective, and yet nothing can happen. I've been doing, like with the book I'm working on, I've been doing a lot of reading of studies in soft science, like human behavioral studies, and how people tend to react, like how we think a rational person acts, but how human beings actually act. And a lot of the experiments are things like game theory, the prisoner's dilemma. Like if you've got two people that if two people who are involved in a crime, and if neither confesses, both go free. But if you present both of them with hey, if you tell us what happened, you'll go free, can they both hold out to get the best deal? And tendencies are that people start to look out for themselves. And it's interesting to watch that play out in college sports because we're seeing it. I think most college coaches, and certainly most college athletic departments, understand that there are certain things that are not in the sport's best interest. It is not good to have, I think everybody recognizes it's crazy to have a 25-year-old basketball player who's been playing for 4 years overseas come and play college basketball in America. Like, that's crazy. Yet there are certain people who are willing to cross that bridge because of the personal advantage. Like, big picture, this is bad for the sport. And small picture, this will help my team win and I've got to stay employed. And that's kind of what Tom Izzo was saying last year when Baylor was going to let that guy play. There's this like, hey, what are we doing? There's no solidarity here. And it's because both at the program level, but then at the conference level, everybody's just acting in their own self-interest. And by doing so, they're undermining any central regulation that could occur. Did you like my soft science example? I got prisoner's dilemma in there, Christian.
That was good.
Or did you just stop, like your eyes glaze over about halfway through my spiel?
No, listen, it's May 27th. And I was thinking yesterday, I wrote about the swing games on Washington's schedule, like that middle class of the schedule that could go either way. That's going to probably dictate whether they're still in college football playoff contention come November. And I was like, this is nice. Some football, And here we are talking about not just off-field matters, but Washington, D.C., everyone's favorite topic. It's such a broken record. I feel like I'm being very like annoying and pedantic by continuing to hammer this, but every single proposed solution is a Band-Aid until the industry agrees the players are employees and they collectively bargain. And this is another Band-Aid.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Is it frustrating for you to cover?
Yes and no. And
yeah.
No, because like I like more things than just games,
Yeah.
Like
no, it's definitely intellectually interesting. When I ask
for all the same, like for a lot of the same reasons you were just discussing, right? Like it is genuinely just interesting. I try to be careful not to like force feed it to people.
Yeah.
I think that the average reader and the average college football fan is like beyond sick of hearing about administrators and legislation this and SCORE Act that, and even like the collective bargaining discussion and all the off-field stuff. I think people do their eyes just kind of glaze over, and it's like, wake me when there's something interesting. I mean, even the House settlement, a completely like foundational shift in the way that the sport is managed. The introduction of NIL, right? The ushering in of the NIL era. Unless you are talking about specific dollar figures, like and who's making what, who's getting paid what, who got offered what, people just aren't super into it. Like when I was still at The Athletic, there were discussions on discussions on discussions about metrics and what got read and what didn't and what subjects we should not stay away from, but not write about as much because they just don't get read and like the NCAA rule making stuff, even football rules, even like rule changes, which like changes to the way the game is played, which there's a couple every year, even like really important ones. It was like, it doesn't really move the needle, And so I like writing about it. It interests me. The human dynamics are interesting, but it gets to be a little frustrating just because I know like every time I sit down to write about it, I'm like, this is not really what people want. But it's at a certain point, you're not doing due diligence if you don't at least cover it and make people aware of it.
Yeah, I could see it being frustrating from the perspective that it's pretty clear what it's going to take to get a workable solution to player compensation. If you're going to compensate players, they eventually need to have, for that system to work, there needs to be representation that they have in agreeing to a framework for that. And that anything short of that, it feels like a broken record of like, here are the 3 half measures that are being put in place, but we all know that nothing really is going to change until it get like that. There's a redundant nature of that. I think from my perspective, what I've found is that I've tried to stop being frustrated by the lack of effective regulation. Like I've stopped being like, my God, can't they just get it together? And instead viewed it as, look at these idiots. And to feel that college football and college sports in general have kind of always been this way. It's always been kind of crazy and things moving around. And it's just always been screwy. And I'm not going to expect it to make sense or be well thought out or feasible because of the various, somewhat the nature of the sport and how many programs are in Division I and how wide the range is from the top of FBS to the bottom of FBS, that there's very little, the top conference in FBS has very little in common with the bottom, that there's such a wide variance that you're just going to have these insane things. But I also get how that it's frustrating and that it has turned a lot of fans off. Yeah, it's such a weird time to be involved in the sport.
We cite Ross Dellinger so much on this podcast, and it's because he's all over all these topics. I do wonder from time to time, I'm like, is he sick of this? Like, if you audited his byline over the course of a year, how many stories are written about football players or football coaches or football games, and how many are written about lawmakers and administrators?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that happens. I remember I don't want to name him because I don't know if he'd be okay with it, but he covered the Seahawks daily, like when I was covering the Seahawks for the Seattle Times. And at one point he was talking about Leroy Hill was a player for the Seahawks, and he was really good early in his career. And then he had a lot of injuries and legal issues in the later part of his career. And the guy kind of just said to me, he goes, I've written about Leroy Hill 25 times more during the off season than during the actual season, because he was hurt or unavailable for games. When he did play, it wasn't that much of a difference, but he was constantly in the news. And stuff like that happens in sports, and it's really strange where we're all drawn to the games. Like that's why everybody purportedly follows the sport. Yet there are some people whom their greatest importance occurs completely off the field and divorced from anything that happens on the field. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's just weird.
Anyway, Ian has a question about finances.
Yeah, to get into to some good old-fashioned football, let's talk dollars and cents with Ian McFarland.
Good morning, guys. Slightly less scenic background than I've had the last couple of weeks. But good to be back in North America. I sent you both some reporting from Matt Brown, who cataloged all the public universities' spending on college football. I was really surprised to see that Washington was number 5 last year in total program spending. Now, that doesn't include outside NIL, which Washington doesn't have, I don't think, right? I think everything is internal now. So some programs that are beneath them on the spending chart are actually spending more. Oregon, great example, $40 million roster. But it raises a question. I've shared my sad belief that the lack of big people in the West is going to make it nearly impossible in a multi-round playoff environment for Washington and even Oregon and maybe SC to compete in a modern college football environment. But with the costs being what they are, can a team in a major metro compete? The costs of living are so much higher in Seattle, in the Bay Area, in Los Angeles, than they are in Lubbock, Texas, than they are in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, even in Columbus, Ohio. Can you compete at this level? Or do you just have to take the attitude of, yeah, we're in Seattle, that's where we are, we're going to need to raise twice as much money as everybody else to keep our coaches, to run our operation, to pay the debt on our stadium? Curious your thoughts. I wish you guys a good week. Go Dogs.
So the number for Washington, and this is for the 2025 fiscal year, which is the 2024-2025 academic year, so the 2024 football season. They spent about $80.5 million on football. That's against $121 million or so in operating revenue. To Ian's point, like I have heard people at Washington complain about this, and it applies to a few areas distinctly. I mean, the biggest I think would be like construction around facilities projects. Like construction costs in Seattle are far different than they would be in non-metropolitan cities or areas, I suppose. I would guess Washington's probably spending more on travel than its average Big Ten counterpart, though I don't know that for sure. So, the football program reported, I think, just shy of $4.9 million in travel expenses for the 2024 season, which I feel like that's a pretty travel heavy season. I mean, it was a 5 road game season. And it was, you had Oregon, which is a shorter trip, but they had to go to Penn State. They went to Iowa, they went to Indiana, and they went to Rutgers. Like that's a pretty, it's a long haul schedule. So I would imagine it would usually end up a smaller number than that. The costs do tend to increase on a year by year basis. They do have, Ian mentioned me, that the debt service payment, I would imagine, is, that's an expense that a lot of programs just aren't going to have, right? And schools finance their facilities projects in different ways. Not all of them take out loans. Some are able to do it fully donor funded. This is a payment that stems, though, from a loan that was taken out 13 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, or maybe even sooner. That's just when it opened. And also it's about to, it was, so their the line item is athletic facilities, debt service, leases, and rental fee. And for 2024, or for fiscal year 2025, it was just shy of $9.3 million. That number is going to go way up because they're out of this period where the board let them make principal only payments on that loan, and now they're going to have to pay principal and interest again, which I think it's going up to like $16 million a year just for the Husky Stadium loan. So, facilities and maintenance operations was $4.7 million. Meals was $5.3 million. That's a lot. So that's another area, right? Sourcing food and healthy ingredients and all that, I would imagine, is more expensive in a bigger city. You're on average probably paying more for recruiting. Washington's foremost recruiting ground is California. You can't drive there. You have to fly there. Although in-person recruiting is a pretty insignificant, I want to say insignificant, like, cost of your recruiting budget. I feel like most of that is on manpower, but that's another thing that should be pointed out, right? Like, everybody accounts for things differently.
Mm-hmm.
So, Washington might book a certain spend as being football specific, whereas another program might book it to the general athletic budget. And there are NCAA guidelines on that, but I'm not an accountant, so I don't want to pretend to know them intimately. To Ian's point, I don't think any of that precludes a team in a metro area from competing for a championship.
I tend to agree because there are benefits that come from it. Those benefits should be amplified in an era of endorsements. I don't know if that's actually proven out yet, that just might be an idea that if you're in a bigger media market with more surrounding companies, you should have more endorsement opportunities. I don't know how that's turned out in real world practice, but I look at how schools that have jumped up, what has been the explanation, and it's usually been that somebody, like a big benefactor, kind of either steps up or you get a transformative coach. That it's never about, you don't have Tampa Bay Rays stories in college football where this school runs things exceptionally smart and they're in a low, their costs are so much lower than everyone else and it allows them to punch way above their weight. If everything was predicated on spend, then I think you would see more of those sort of stories. And I think generally, the most important asset that your program has is your coach. I think the second most important asset that your program has is the compensation packages that, like, in current day. And then the third most is your program's history. I think those are the three. I think cost of living or the expense of an environment, I don't see that being this big weight, because I think there are advantages that come with it too.
Should note too, like NIL is not in any way a part of this discussion at all. Internal, external. This was again for the 2024 football season, so there is no house settlement, there is no revenue share money coming from the athletic department. So you can throw another, 15 or so $million on top of that expense for the football program, but that it's a wash, right? Because everybody's going to be spending that internally, and then it becomes a matter of like what we've only talked about a million times. What third party money can you get, and that is not reported by the department. So there's also like, I don't know what portion of, and then this is revenue, not expenses, but like I don't know what portion of their multimedia rights agreement they're assigning to football versus other sports. Is that just department revenue, even though the vast majority of that is going to end up being associated with football? And so I wouldn't, like, for example, I'm looking at Matt Brown's story right now, and like Washington is 5th or 6th in fiscal year 25 football expenses. The 5 schools ahead of them are Ohio State, Penn State, Florida State, Clemson, and Alabama. Are we to believe that, effectively speaking, Washington is spending more money to run its football program than Michigan is?
Seems unlikely.
Rutgers is 7th on the list. Rutgers is right behind Washington. Is Rutgers a rich athletic program? Is Rutgers a rich football program? So there's nuance within this that there's more than meets the eye. With that said, like, these are the numbers from the NCAA financial reports. Like, you want to make comparisons. Like, this is the only real way to do it. It's still fairly fraught. I always point out when I write about Washington's financial report, the official one that they file with the NCAA, which is what we're talking about here, it doesn't even line up with what they present to their own board of regents. Like, what they present to their board of regents is like the real financial picture. Here's how you're really doing. Here's what the cash flow deficit is. By the time it gets filed to the NCAA, money's been moved, and the NCAA wants you to account for things differently than than how you account for it internally on your own campus. And so, it's good. The NCAA it's a good measure to like benchmark. Okay, what did Washington spend on meals for football players last year versus this year? How did certain expenses or revenues change? And it tells you something about conference media rights distributions and total conference distributions and everything, which is obviously a hot topic for Washington especially. So it's useful for a lot of things. I would caution against deriving like sweeping conclusions from it about who's spending and who's not.
It does, as you're talking. It reminds me of what it was like to hear, and this was especially when I covered the Sonics, how they would describe year-over-year budgets, and we quote-unquote lost money. That the Mariners for years too had their budget scrutinized in this same way. I believe that you can make someone in an accounting department, or the way when you're dealing with budgets like this, you can have it tell the story you want to tell. That it's the fiscal statements give you a window into seeing it, but you're not quite sure how the view is impacted by what they want it to show. When the Sonics wanted a new arena, it very much helped them to show how they were losing money. And in general, pro franchises have wanted to emphasize that they don't make money year over year. And that doesn't really tell the whole story of certainly appreciation of franchise value. I don't know. I have yet to find a financial study that provides the silver bullet explaining how the finances in college athletic programs work. I don't know if anybody has. What you try to do is get the glimpses where you can to construct an overall picture. And I think in general, it's encouraging that Washington certainly doesn't seem to be looking for the cheapest path. They're doing their very best to not have the limited share of Big Ten revenue sort of lower their expectations, either in terms of facilities or coaching. But I also know that it's in their best interest in terms of donations and support to make it seem like they can be really struggling as well, or that they really need support because of the challenges that they're facing.
Yeah, no major college athletic department ever wants to show a big profit.
Yeah, or to say, hey, we're doing fine.
Like you want to show, I think you appease the board by if you are fortunate to bring in $20 million more than what it costs to run all your programs at the way that you think they should be run, you find a way to spend that $20 million. You don't want to be seen as hoarding money. You don't want to be seen as running a business.
Yeah.
Really. You want to be able to show your board like a minimal surplus or a minimal deficit that says, see, look, got a handle on this. We're spending money on our students and coaches as fast as we make it. We're not trying to pad salaries. We're not trying to stockpile dollars to make a bunch of money to make people rich. We're just trying to raise money and make money so that we can spend it on great experiences for everybody involved. And look, we're more or less breaking even. This isn't big business. That's what every major college athletic department wants to show. So like even the ones that lose money, if it were a business, they wouldn't have lost money. They would have cut costs somewhere. They would have not spent X dollars on a certain ingredient for meals all year. They would have cut meals here and there for certain programs. They would have changed the way they travel. They would have,
Wait, could we go get Tom Dundon?
Yeah,
the new Blazers guy. Early checkouts for everybody.
You don't want to see what Tom Dundon would do it's so funny. I was talking with somebody who was like, and this was at a different school, not at Washington. Although I can imagine most schools probably do some version of this, who was like, we always had, it was like a certain snack, a certain like post-game snack that they only got after wins on the road. And it was like, it didn't travel, and it was like, so I always wondered, like, if we lost, we had to prepare that ahead of time. Like, what do we do with it? Do we just throw it away? Like, you don't get it because you didn't win, and now you just spent all this money on ice cream or whatever it was for players. So
that's funny.
All kinds of stuff like that. I flew on the UW charter one time when I was a student. It was part of a deal with some deal we had. I did some stuff for, I think it was like the Big W Club magazine in whatever iteration it was back then. And it was just like a nonstop like candy buffet. Just like baskets of king size bars, and the flight attendants are like, take as many, take them, as many as you can. I would imagine that was, 17 years ago now. I would imagine they've probably like evolved a little bit as far as the nutrition piece of it. They're a little more conscious about what they're plying players with, especially on a 4 or 5 hour cross country flight for some of these Big Ten trips. But I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, it is. It's operating as a business, but kind of retaining the feeling that it is a membership driven organization, because that's a big appeal of college football, is that you're part of it, and it makes things. We're in a period where everything is being readjusted. I do like the idea of just like slinging king size Snicker bars up and down the aisles on Air Husky.
Hell yeah.
We were supposed to draft the UW schedule. Maybe we'll save that for.
That was the plan
for an upcoming schedule. Do you have one game that you think is the most pivotal game on this UW schedule?
Boy, it's an interesting exercise. I ran into this when I was writing about it on Tuesday. Like, Indiana could be pretty damn pivotal if they win that game, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's 2 games on this schedule where you'd say if they win it, they stole one out of the like likely loss column, right? And it's Indiana and Oregon. what makes this schedule so unique is that like there were more of those games last year, right? You had Ohio State, you had Oregon, and even though Michigan wasn't like a behemoth, like Washington going to play at Michigan, that's a tough game. That's a game where if they win, you feel like they're +1 in a sense, right? So I think they really only have 2 of those games this year, but the coin flip games, for lack of a better term, the middle class of the schedule, the like this sitting here right now on May 27th, you could really see these games going either way. These are going to kind of define the season. That portion of their schedule is much more sizable this year.
Yep.
And the context that I put it into is, I think that the Big Ten had 6 teams last year that didn't make bowl games, and Washington played 5 of them. And then they played Oregon, Ohio State, and Michigan. And so Illinois was really like the only, this team could more or less be considered like our equal on any given Saturday, like Washington or Illinois could beat each other. Whether that was actually the case, I don't know. I was kind of down on Illinois all year, but it's besides the point. That was kind of that was like the one game. Washington was favored by 3. I think they were favored by 9.5 or more in 8 of their 13 games, counting the bowl game last year. 5.5 or more in 9 of them. So the schedule is very different this year in that I mentioned that 6 teams that didn't make a bowl game. There's only 2 of those on this year's schedule.
Yep.
The other 7 Big Ten opponents all played in the postseason last year and surely will expect to again this year. Purdue and Michigan State are the only ones that didn't. They'll be picked, I would imagine, probably 17th and 18th in the preseason poll, or at least somewhere down in that bottom quadrant or bottom 5th, or however you want to divide 18 teams. The average quality of opponent week in, week out will be greater this year. But I do think that the number of games that would not require a large upset for Washington to win is still somehow higher, because you got Indiana and Oregon waiting at the end of the season. I think all 10 games before that, even though I certainly wouldn't wager on them winning, being 10-0 at that point. You don't look at USC, you don't look at Iowa, you don't look at Nebraska, you don't look at Penn State and think, man, it would take a monumental effort to win that game. But certainly you could also see how any of those opponents could beat Washington. So I kind of see a coin flip, middle class, however you want, could go either way type of tier. I kind of see that being a whole third of the schedule this year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think USC might be the fork in the road.
That was that is my answer to your question.
Oh, it is?
I do. Yeah. Sorry. I didn't actually get there, but thank you for reminding me. USC. Yeah. Maybe it's the first one, right? It's the first of that tier. Like they're going to be heavy favorites, moderate to heavy favorites in each of their first 4. I think they opened as like a 21-point favorite in the Apple Cup.
Yeah.
Certainly they'll be favored against Minnesota. By how much, we'll see. But the expectation is they'll be 4-0 going into that game. It's their first road game. Like USC again, say it they look, it could be pretty good.
Yeah.
It's Lincoln Riley though, so you don't really know, but that's a really talented team. If they beat them and come out of that 5-0.
Yeah, and then the USC plays Oregon the week before.
Yeah,
it's possible if Washington wins that, Lincoln Riley could get turfed.
Yeah, it's the way I kind of wrote it is like it's a pivotal game for Washington. It's an absolute must win for USC.
Yes.
Yeah. USC has a brutal schedule and like CFP or bust expectations.
Yep.
They cannot lose to Washington at home.
At home. Nope. And for Washington, it's not like a loss cancels out what they can do, or hey, you're not going to, but it's hard to see them getting to the college football playoff, which I'm not going to say it's CFP or bust, but that should be an ambition this year. Like that should be like, hey, if things go right and this team takes the step forward that we think it should, they've got a really good quarterback. Like that's not a pipe dream. It's hard to see them getting there if they don't beat USC.
Depending on how good Indiana and or Oregon end up being, Washington might need to win all 4 of those coin flip games to feel really good about getting a CFP bid. Of course, you don't know how else the rest of the college football breaks, there's a world where Washington going 10-2, losing its last 2 games doesn't get in either.
No, that would be the brutal. Like, a win over USC isn't going to make anybody's season, but yeah, I think that.
It's really, really hard to see how they're going to have a chance if they don't go at least 3-1 against that group of 4, and really going 4-0. Obviously, it gives you your very best chance, but might even be required, depending, again, like if Indiana just reloads and is a monster again, and you got to play them and then go to Oregon a week later, like, but also, either one of those programs or both could not be as good as people are thinking. It could take Indiana a year to reset after losing so many talented pieces, even though they brought in a really good transfer class and have a really expensive roster. And by the end of the year, health is a major factor too. It's kind of a crapshoot. Like, people get hurt. They could be missing key players. Key players they brought in could end up being not that good. Like, you never know. But I do think we'll know a ton about this team after USC, and then 6 days later they got Iowa at home.
Yep.
Right. So
good answer.
We'll save the draft for next week.
We'll do that. I think actually next week I'm going to be in San Diego.
San Diego.
Yes. Yeah. With
Pac-12 territory.
That's exactly right. I'm going to go do some scouting for the Aztecs. So it may be 2 weeks that we do the draft.
Okay. Well, you think real hard about which games you want then.
We'll see. Do you want to hear what Mick Cronin has to say about our draft?
What was your thoughts in the student section chanting Booker's name?
I could give a rat's ass about the other team's student section.
That's you sure that's not what he thinks about the Save College Sports Act?
I can tell you he doesn't have a lack of opinions about the travel requirements of the Big Ten for UCLA basketball.
What's UCLA's travel budget?
Yeah.
More to the point, what's their women's basketball travel budget? Because whatever they spent, it was the right number.
Yeah, that's definitely for sure.
Well, Danny won't talk to you next week. Hopefully I hope you pack a sports coat on your trip to San Diego. It's balmy.
I'm not
down
packing
there.
a sports coat to go to San Diego.
I might talk to you next week. We'll see. Enjoy your week regardless.